Hey guys, welcome back to World of Tanks. My name is Bruce and today I want to present the best tech trees in World of Tanks for 2025. Not by my subjective view, but by the official European World of Tanks server statistics. Let's go. As I said, I do not want to give you my opinion, but advice based on the official European server statistics of World of Tanks. So let me show you how I made my calculation. So in order to do our calculation, we use the fantastic tomato.gg webpage. And on this side, we can select tank performance and then we see all the tank statistics of the last 30 days. If we click on recent, that's what we want to do. Then we want to select the tech tree tanks, and then we can basically select every tier that we want, maybe even a tank class. And then what we want to use is we want to use the WN8 values, so how the tank performs in the last 30 days. So here's how we do our calculation. First of all, we take the values of tier 5, tier 6, tier 7, tier 8, tier 9 and tier 10. So those are the WN8 values of the respective tier of the respective tech tree. Now, in order to create the average value, I add an additional factor, which is I weigh the respective value of tier 5 all the way up to tier 10. And the factor with which I weigh the respective tier is 1 for tier 5, 2 for tier 6, 4 for tier 7, 6 for tier 8, 8 for tier 9, and then 10 for tier 10. Why do I do this? Well, simply because it is a lot more painful to play weak tanks on higher tiers than it is to play weak tiers on, let's say, medium tiers on tier 5 or tier 6 or even tier 7. So if the tier 5 tank is very weak, this does not matter too much because you will very quickly, at least relatively quickly, move on to the next tier. Now, if you play a very weak tier 8 or let's say tier 9 tank, this is a different story because you will not be able to very quickly move on to the next tier because it simply takes longer until you have researched all the modules and then unlock the next tier tank. And even then you need a lot of XP in order to unlock the next tier tank. So this is why I do this weighting factor. And then basically what I do is I simply create the average value, and then here you can see the results. So for example, the tech tree line which leads to the can opener achieves a value of 1367, whereas the Super Conqueror only achieves a value of 1170. Now, before I present you the result, let me talk about some interesting findings during my research. First of all, the data has not changed much apart from the recent changes to tanks in some tech trees. Then, unfortunately, we can see that new tech trees are in general better than older ones. One good example is the tech tree which leads to the can opener compared to the Super Conqueror. Wargaming's technique has been to make new tech trees flat out better and then after a couple of months nerf those tanks, so keep that in mind if you are, for example, grinding the tech tree line which leads to the can opener. According to my data, you can clearly see some tiers are really suffering from the matchmaking. The most prominent example is tier 7. So in general, tier 7 tech tree tanks do not perform well, and in my opinion this is due to the fact that tier 7 tanks usually end up in a tier 8, sometimes even in a tier 9 matchup, and in addition to this, the difference or the gap between tier 7 and tier 8 has constantly improved or increased during the last years, especially due to those overpowered tier 8 tech trees as the BZ176 that you see in this match right here. Apart from those bad news, I also found that most recent changes really equaled out the performance of the tanks. And in general, I think Wargaming made a great job balancing out all those tech trees, as I said, in general. And that is great news. So what are the best tech trees in World of Tanks right now? Let's now take a look at the result. So what is the result? What is the best tech tree for you currently in World of Tanks? Well, let's simply find out by selecting the respective tank class. So I select heavy tanks. First of all, let's do this, and then let's sort it like so. So the best heavy tank tech tree is the one which leads to the American T110E5. This tech tree achieves an overall value of 1381, and this is due to the phenomenal strong T110E5 on tier 10, but then also the tier 8 tank, tier 7, and even the tier 6 tank is strong. The tier 6 tank is one of the best tanks overall in the game, tier for tier, the M6. Even the tier 9 tank is not too bad with its value, so those tanks perform well from tier, let's say from tier 5 all the way up to tier 10. The second best heavy tank line is the one which leads to the can opener, so the double-barreled British heavy tanks. And then the third one is the one which leads to the M5Y, and that is no surprise because this tech tree line has achieved some strong buffs recently, making it the third best tech tree line in the game. And as you can see, the higher you get, the better the tanks become, especially the tier 8 tank and then also the tier 10 tank. Now, another surprise for me was the tech tree line which leads to the AMX50B. Now the tier 8 and tier 9 tank are not so strong, but the tier 7 tank is actually pretty strong, and so is the tier 10 tank, which performs really great. So those are the best tech tree lines when it comes to heavy tanks. Now let's jump to medium tanks and let's see how the result is. Let's sort it real quick, and then as you can see, currently in the game, the best tech tree line when it comes to medium tank is the one which leads to the Badger 25T. The Badger performs exceptionally well. It also received a buff recently, but then the lower tier tanks perform very nicely. In my opinion, the tier 5 and the tier 6 tanks, those are all light tanks, perform exceptionally well. The tier 6 AMX 12T is one of the best light tanks tier for tier in the game. Now the tier 8 tank is not performing as nicely, so is the tier 9 tank, but the tier 10 tank is actually pretty nice. Now the second best tech tree line when it comes to medium tank is the one which leads to the UDAS 1516. The tier 8 tank performs exceptionally well. I think it's because of its overall statistics. The gun handling is relatively nice for such a high alpha gun. It is relatively mobile. It lets you play vision games. The tier 10 tank is also pretty strong. So this was kind of a surprise for me, but it actually is a pretty nice tech tree. Also because the lower tiers also perform very nicely. The third best tech tree, but keep in mind those numbers are all pretty close. The third best one is the one which leads to the CS63, so the Polish medium tank tech tree. And then shortly thereafter you find the Chinese one which leads to the 121, and then also the one which leads to the K91. Now I always recommend the one which leads to the Centurion Action X. Looks like the tier 8 tank does not perform too well, so does the tier 7 tank. For me personally, the tier 7 tank works much better than this statistic shows us. And then also the tier 5 tank performs much better. I think most of the people tend to make the mistake to use the derp gun on the tier 5 tank, and so with this gun, this tank actually does not perform very well. But the tier 9 tank is super great, and also the tier 10 tank. This is one of the best medium tanks overall in the game. So yeah, this is the result for the medium tanks, and let's now choose the tank destroyer. and see what we get. So tank destroyers, and then let's sort it. As you can see, by far the best tech tree when it comes to tank destroyers in World of Tanks is the one which leads to the WZ113GFT, so the Chinese tank destroyer tech tree line. The tier tank is the best one overall when it comes to the WN8. The tier 9 one is the best one, the tier 8 one is the best one, and then the tier 7 tank also performs great, so do the tier 5 and tier 6 tanks. So I would recommend to play this tech tree line. It is by far the most competitive one, tier for tier, when it comes to tank destroyers in World of Tanks. Now the second best one is the one which leads to the Hori 3, so the Japanese one. Those tanks have recently received a nerf, however looks like this tech tree still performs very well and is second best in class currently in World of Tanks. Now to my surprise, the third best one is the one which leads to the American T110E4, and this is by far better than the other American tech tree tank which leads to the T110E3, and in my opinion this is due to the flexibility of those tanks. So the tier 10 tank is fine, nothing out of the ordinary. The tier 9 tank is great, however it also has received a slight nerf. The tier 8 tank is actually fine, the tier 7 tank is fine. In my opinion, the best tank out of this tech tree is the tier 6 Hellcat, which can be played as a medium tank destroyer hybrid, and I have made a couple of videos about this tank which I can really recommend. So for Spee, this tech tree line has received an upgrade, and yeah, it is now the fourth best tank destroyer tech tree line in World of Tanks, and you can see the nice performance, especially of the top tier tanks, but then also of the tier 8 tanks. So those are the recommendations and the best performing tech trees in World of Tanks currently when it comes to tank destroyers. So let's now select light tanks, and let's see what we get. So we do not have too many light tanks in the game, but the best performing light tank tech tree, actually to my surprise as well, is the one which leads to the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen. Now, maybe because this tank performs so nicely currently in World of Tanks, it is a phenomenal tank that you do not want to miss. It has its problems when it needs to spot against tanks like, let's say, the Manticore or the MX-13105. But its gun handling is superb, its mobility is superb, and it's simply outperforming other tanks. Now, I always recommend the tech tree which leads to the MX-13105, simply because those tanks all perform well and they all have the same playstyle, so this makes it very easy and, let's say, beginner friendly, because they all they have the same playstyle, and they all are played basically the same way. Now the third best one is the one which leads to the Manticore, but you can see that this one actually drops quite significantly compared to the first and the second one. Now the Manticore is a fantastic tank, the tier 9 Jisoo is not. The tier 8 tanks, tier 7 and tier 6 tanks are also not so bad. So yeah, in my opinion you should play the German light tank tech tree as well as the French one. And let's now look at the artilleries, and let's see which one is the best. So as you can see, artilleries all perform well below average in World of Tanks. This has to do with the nerfs that Wargaming has done to all the artilleries in World of Tanks. So if you want to have fun and if you want to play competitive tech trees, then yeah, circumnavigate artilleries. They are not competitive anymore in World of Tanks, which is a shame, because I think there are lots of players who like to play arties in World of Tanks, but that's just how it is. Now the best one is actually the one which leads to the Russian Object 261. So if you want to play artillery, then go ahead and select either the Russian one or the one of the US tech tree, which leads to the T92. The differences are ever so minor, but those are the best tech trees. Now, the one which performs worst is actually the French one, and I think this has to do with below average alpha damage of those tanks. But once again, overall, artilleries actually do not perform well nowadays in World of Tanks. Alright guys, that was it for today with the video about the best tech trees in World of Tanks. Does your opinion match with the official data of the European server statistic? What do you think about my calculation? Just leave a comment in the comment section down below. And as always, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. This really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you find this video extremely helpful, then feel free to support me via Super Thanks. This way you can make a one-time donation. You just have to click this button underneath the video. If you adore this channel and you want to consistently support me, then consider subscribing to my channel or become a member, once again with the click of a button underneath the video. Thanks a lot, and I see you next time in another World of Tanks video.